Well, good morning. It's an honor for me and also a pleasure to give a seminar on the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Corporación para Investigaciones Biológicas. I've been several times in your institution and I have a very good friend and long-term collaborator in Dr. Rafael Arango. So we worked together on Pseudospora fijensis and also on Fusarium, and Rafael spent substantial time in my lab as a visiting scientist, so the bonds with SIB are strong, and I have very good memories of traveling to Medellin and visiting you at SIB and elsewhere. So with that, I would like to congratulate you once more with the 50th anniversary, and I truly and wholeheartedly hope that we will be able to collaborate in the forthcoming years as well. And with that, I would like to start on my seminar that is called, as you can see in the slide, Tropical Race 4 Threatens Global Banana Production. So what I usually like to do really while talking on Fusarium wilt in banana is to go back in history. And what you see in this slide is an inundated field that was planted to Gros Michel bananas in Honduras in the 50s. And one of the ways to control Fusarium wilt or Panama disease in Gros Michel that was struck by race 1 was inundation. So you generate an anaerobic environment that kills all aerobic organisms. So this definitely was very successful in killing off Fusarium propagules, inoculum, in the soil. And then these areas were replanted, as you can see in this picture. It's the same plots, but then replanted to new Gros Michel plants. However, there is one major difference with our present time, and that is that in the 50s there was no tissue culture available. So all these plants that you see are derived from siblings, from cuttings. And in many cases, part of these new plants were already infected by Fusarium species. They were then planted in these inundated plots. And of course, all natural enemies and others were also killed by inundation. So eventually, this really boomed the epidemic. And that resulted really in shifting agriculture. So there was more and more land required to make sure that the production levels were maintained up to a level that countries like Guatemala, for instance, was almost for 50% owned by banana companies. So as a short-term measure, inundation worked to kind of kill off inoculum, but in this new virgin, so to say, land, once infections took place, the disease really ravaged through plantations, and eventually this really resulted in the end of Gros Michel and in a major economic decline of banana producing countries that also coincided, of course, with major unemployment and societal unrest. Now, the monoculture cropping of a banana was revived after Cavendish bananas were, so to say, discovered as resistant replacements for Gros Michel. And this decision was, of course, not taken overnight. This really took a few decades for the banana producers to change to Cavendish production, because Cavendish came with a price. It was not simply replacing Gros Michel by Cavendish, but also the entire logistic chain had to be tailored. And so the Gros Michel bunches were cut as a whole and put as bunch in the ship and transported, whereas Cavendish had to be pampered in carton boxes and in refrigerated ships. And that, of course, came with an immense cost. But the success of Cavendish was unheard of. And that's what you see here. So this is the Urabá region in Colombia. Cavendish was super and is super resistant to the strains that caused the previous epidemic, the so-called race 1 strains. And that made Cavendish extremely popular, and that also really contributed to the global development of Cavendish monocultures as I said, in many countries, up to the level, as you can see now here in this pie chart, that Cavendish represent about 50% of the global production. So Cavendish bananas represent really and dominate the export by over 95%. But apart from the export, Cavendish is also very important for domestic markets. Look, for instance, at China. That's almost entirely Cavendish. India, 50% Cavendish. And even new plantations are being developed in many countries, including Africa. And so the success of Cavendish is truly unheard of. And what we have to keep in mind, and that is important for the rest of the talk, Cavendish is not the result of a breeding program. Cavendish was just stumbled upon. Cavendish actually was a botanical variant that was found in tropical forest, maintained for years in botanical gardens, ended up in Mauritius, for instance, but eventually ended up in the UK in botanical gardens, and then only gradually it was found to be resistant to race 1 strains, and therefore became so popular. But it is essentially a wild clone. Okay, so everything we eat in the majority of bananas have not been touched by breeders. These are natural variants. Now, Cavendish was an extremely, lucky shot, or if you wish, a blessing for banana producers, because it really quenched the race 1 epidemic. And up to this time, you can grow Cavendish plants in heavily contaminated soils with race 1, and it's just flourishing. It has one very major deficiency, and that it is super susceptible to Black Sigatoka, the foliar disease that hammers banana around the world. Today, we're not going to talk about Black Sigatoka, but if there are 2 diseases that are really extremely significant for the sustainability of the crop, then it is Fusarium wilt. That's a killer, but goes slow. Black Sigatoka comes with immense cost, goes fast, and is airborne. Okay, so now you have, let's say, the bigger picture of the historical track record of Fusarium wilt and how banana producers coped with the disease. However, this is a photograph from the Philippines. The Philippines is the second most important exporter of the world, primarily to the eastern countries, Korea, Japan, China. Mindanao, the most southern island of the Philippines, is about 80,000 hectares devoted to banana production. And in this case, that banana production is export production, so that's Cavendish. And here now you see a field in Mindanao that is struck by another Fusarium strain that is extremely pathogenic on Cavendish. Now, this is not a very recent story. The first indications for Cavendish to succumb again to Fusarium wilt actually is already from the 1960s in Taiwan. But for the far majority of producers, Taiwan was far away. That's Asia, that will not hit us. Since then, TR4 has really disseminated across Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, and here you see the result. This is reminiscent of the race 1 epidemics in Gros Michel. So Cavendish is not only susceptible to Black Sigatoka, but also super susceptible to what we call the tropical race 4 strain. And so in our research, we have concluded that the Fusarium species that is represented by TR4 is actually not a Fusarium oxysporum, but we gave it a new name, Fusarium odoratissimum. This goes way more in the taxonomy, and I hit a little bit on this in my upcoming slides. So this is where we are right now. TR4 hits Cavendish, and not only in Southeast Asia, but also in many other parts of the world. And I come back to the details of that. But let's first look at what Fusarium wilt really is. Here you see in the right side a photograph of a banana plant that is affected by Fusarium wilt. So you see the significant chlorosis of the leaves, they eventually die, and during this process the fungus is colonizing the whole vasculature, coming in through the roots and truly occludes all the vascular system of the plants. That's why it starts wilting. It dies, and once it dies, and during this process of pathogenesis, there's an immense amount of inoculum being produced. Simultaneously, the fungus is producing inoculum in the soil. Different propagules, and one of those propagules is called a glamidospore. Those are surviving spores that can really survive in soil for decades. Let me give you one example. I've been in 2 experiments in Costa Rica and in Australia where they planted Gros Michel back into soils that were once, let's say, affected by race 1, and after decades they just replanted Cavendish to see what would happen. And within 6 months, those Gros Michel plants got again infected and developed Fusarium wilt, telling you that the race 1 inoculum still is around in those soils. That does not necessarily mean that it is only glamidospores. In our research, we have also discovered that these Fusarium species are very versatile. They can kill a banana plant, but they can sit in a weed as an endophyte. We even don't see that the plant is infected. And so in this way, the fungus is really able to overcome periods without banana. But if you come back with a banana, it will hit you again. So in summary, soil-borne disease, a very persistent disease. The fungus colonizes the vasculature, and the Gros Michel epidemic was not just caused by a single species, and the species until now was called, or until we published that, Fusarium oxysphorum formispecialis cubense. But what we have shown is that there's actually a plethora of different Fusarium species. But in Cavendish, it is one single species that kills it, and that is Fusarium odoratissimum, and colloquially we call it tropical race 4. And if you then cut the stem, this is what you see. So you see this discoloration, all the yellow parts that you see over here, those are infected or colonized vascular strands. And the same year, these parts of the stem are completely colonized and full of inoculum. So by just, let's say, cutting this stem, you have aerosols being spread that are full of inoculum. And so this is an immense source of dissemination. But it really shows you also the dramatic symptom that you see internally. And so eventually this plant will succumb and leave its inoculum in the soil. All right, now what is very important, and then we still have an historical context, and that is, let's see what can we learn from history. And that's why I put here on the right panel the cover of the book of John Saluri, Banana Cultures. That book is on the agriculture, the consumption, and the environmental change in Honduras and the United States of banana production in the 1920s. So it covers also the period when Fusarium wilt struck banana production, as well as Black Sigatoka, but primarily Fusarium. And what you see in the book, what is written very clearly, all the attempts that were conducted to stop the epidemic and to put it in one-liner summary, everything failed until they start growing Cavendish. Why? Because Cavendish has this phenomenal resistance to race 1 strains. And so we don't need another example. We have the example in front of us. If you would plant Gros Michel in Urabá, you would develop a lot of Panama disease. There's no question. And so we see that the durability of resistance in Cavendish to race 1 is extraordinary, and it's also exceptional. I don't know of any other crop where a single variety has been grown for decades without being infected again by a fungus because of the selection pressure that you normally put when you start growing a resistant cultivar. As I said earlier on, you can put a lot of selection pressure on Fusarium, but it has, of course, this hiding place. It just can go to other hosts and just sits there until banana returns. And so the durability of Cavendish resistance is incredible and exceptional. And that also results in the fact that we tend to forget the past. So we also tend to forget everything that was done to stop the race 1 epidemic, and we also forget that everything that was being done, that was being conducted, essentially wasn't the solution, including microbes, including nutrition, including other varieties with better levels of resistance, or let's say less susceptible. And this comes together then also, due to the success of Cavendish, the amount of research that was invested in banana production, and particularly in understanding these diseases, and let's say even more in particular, understanding the genetic basis was in banana very, very poor. And that's what I show you here. If you look, I worked for more than 25 years in wheat diseases, primarily on Zyma sartoria tritici, which is a relative of Pseudocercospora fijensis, the black sigatoka fungus in banana. If you look in the history of wheat research, we see that the number of genes that was identified in wheat as a crop is over 8,000. In banana, less than 25. If you look at the number of genes that has been identified that play a role, just resistance genes and resistance to pests, more than 1,000 genes. In banana, it's only 2. I mean, it is, to be honest, embarrassing. The first gene for resistance to TR4 has been identified and cloned by the group of James Dale in Australia. The second gene is the gene that we mapped in the genome of a wild banana. For black sigatoka, not a single resistance gene has been identified. So what we need to do to avoid pseudoscience, miscommunication, the snake oil sellers with all kinds of treatments to save the Cavendish crop from TR4, or even vaccinate Cavendish to TR4. The only way to do that is we have to swamp really with new information, with peer-reviewed science to kick up this number. We need to know, we need to understand the genetics, and we have to use those genes in modern, fast-forward breeding programs. And we should not rely on old-fashioned, unproven technologies. That's the summary of the slide. And that's also our aim, and that's our ambition. That's what's driving us. And so if you talk about sustainability of banana production, our program is not focused on maintaining Cavendish. Our program is to replace Cavendish by a panel of super excelling, disease-resistant, well-tasting new banana varieties. And there's only one way of doing that, and that is breeding. So we come back to that later. So here's the gene I was talking about. So James Dale's group found a resistance gene in Musa acuminata malacensis, the wild A genome donor of Cavendish and other varieties carrying the A genome. So they identified the gene for race 1 resistance, and here you see it. Here this is the control. So without the gene, you have this susceptibility. With the gene, you have an excellent level of resistance, not only in the greenhouse, but also in multi-year field trials. That's a phenomenal piece of work. And we were very happy and fortunate that we could be part of it. And so this is the very first gene that has been identified for resistance to TR4. Now, swamping the community with research, of course, require, and with accurate information and peer-reviewed journal, peer-reviewed papers requires a lot of research. So we took the initiative together with a group of colleagues that you see here on the right part. So Andre Drent from the University of Queensland, Mika Dita Biodiversity, Kees Janssen, Sietse Vellema, Jetse Storval from Wageningen University. So we are a multidisciplinary team. And we started in Frontiers in Plant Science a research topic on Panama disease, which is a community effort, which is essentially bringing the latest research to the table. And as you can see, I just took this picture yesterday. We have over 100,000 views of that research topic and the papers that are being published there. So this is a fantastic way for extension, for bringing the latest to the community and also to banana stakeholders. So you can see where we are we with our insights and developments. And of course, I have to admit, we still have an awful lot to learn. That's very clear because the banana research community is small. And that's why we are very committed to bring new people to the community, and particularly young people. And so this research area should be as attractive as Arabidopsis was 20 years ago. And you know where we are now in Arabidopsis. That's where we want to get with banana. Or let's say a little bit more modest example. Let's go to wheat. Wheat is such an important crop. Banana is extremely important too, but the research community and the breeding efforts in wheat are way, way beyond where we are in banana. So that's what we have to build. We have to build a community of committed young scientists that see the opportunities and also the challenges of banana research. So it's truly an honor to work with such a great group of stakeholders to go and to grow in that direction. Now, here you have an example. I see on my slide that I'm missing something here, so I'm just going to tell it to you. Here you have this picture again of a banana plant affected by Fusarium wilt. And here you see these two plants here is Cavendish, so here should have been written Cavendish. And here you see Gros Michel. So here you have race 1. So race 1 is avirulent on Cavendish. That's why it was able to replace Gros Michel, because Gros Michel is hammered and killed by race 1. But you see that Gros Michel is also very susceptible to tropical race 4. And here you see also the impact of tropical race 4 on Cavendish. So this is a truly black and white comparison. One and the same variety, super resistant to race 1, super susceptible to TR4. Well, as a geneticist and as a plant pathologist, I'm intrigued by seeing these differences. And so was my PhD student Fajar Ahmad from Indonesia. So the first thing we want to do, we want to understand which genes are responsible in Cavendish to protect it to race 1 for this difference here. And as I said earlier on, I was surprised that such a study had not been conducted. So what we did, and Fajar did part of his thesis work in Indonesia. So he made a mapping population. He selved a fertile Musa acuminata malacensis plant. So we generated a mapping population. That is a population where you can identify the number of genes involved in resistance. That took us about 2 years. That's a lengthy process, but once you have it, you have a fantastic resource. So once we had the phenotype, once we had the mapping population, we phenotyped it. With phenotyping, I mean, we inoculated it with race 1 and with TR4, and we studied the segregation. That's what we call QTL mapping. And we mapped a major QTL for race 1, as you can see here in the rhizomes, the green color on chromosome 10. So we have now a genetic window on chromosome 10 where we are sure there is a gene for resistance to race 1. So, despite the fact that Cavendish saved the banana industry from Fusarium wilt caused by race 1 strains, and that's already grown for 70 years in Central America, only now we are close to identifying the gene that is responsible for this level of resistance. And of course, we are now looking for the same level of resistance to TR4. So we have screened hundreds of banana accessions to see, can we find this level of resistance? And fortunately, yes, we can. But it's only a minor percentage. It's about 14% of close to 500 accessions that we have tested that have this required level of resistance. And now, of course, our duty is to identify the genes that underlie this resistance, not to use them for genetic modification. You need these genes, you need the markers to accelerate classical breeding. Classical breeding is still the mainstream of crop improvement. If you look at the success of Dutch horticulture, that is for a major percentage is driven by genetic improvements and by smart breeding. But smart breeding comes, of course, hand in hand with modern, innovative cultivation techniques. Take tomato. Tomato 50 years ago, the yield was maybe 20% of what we have now as yields. So the yields have at least quadrupled. And the basis for that is not only breeding. Breeding is very important, but also the cultivation techniques. Now we grow tomatoes in huge greenhouses where the number of kilograms we harvest per square meter is over 80. That was way, way lower 20 years ago. And so, in my opinion, there is still a fantastic window for improvement in cultivation techniques of banana. We grow banana essentially the same way we did it 100 years ago. So I'm sure there is space for improvement and for innovation. Okay, now TR4. As I said, the first indications of TR4 affecting Cavendish were already in the 60s in Taiwan. Since then, it has really disseminated here in Southeast Asia. And all the green dots that you see are the incidences of TR4 where we were involved in diagnosing it. And for diagnosing it, we have developed a molecular diagnostic, as we call a diagnostic kit. So this has been used in all those incursions, including the recent one here in Guajira in Colombia, and also here in Mayotte, the most recent one in 2020. So when we published in 2014, the first incursion of TR4 outside Southeast Asia, that was a shockwave. You know, TR4 showed up in Jordan, which is in the middle of the desert, a small plantation. And since then, you really see a kind of flood of information of new incursions in different countries, up to an incursion here, actually in a botanical experiment in the UK. So it has been accidentally introduced in that experiment, which shows you how risky and how easily you can transfer tropical race 4 into even non-banana producing countries. But unfortunately also this very recent incursion and the first entry of TR4 in Latin America. And so you really see this movement here, and I'm afraid that this will not be the last incursion in Latin America. That's what the history of all these incursions tell us. So this is, in a nutshell, the story of the dissemination of TR4. Now, in my program, and in the programs I have directed, we had multiple PhD students, including a number of PhD students from Indonesia, as well as from other countries. Now here you see Nani Mariani, and she decided to deep sample Indonesia. So all the red dots that you see here are different islands in Indonesia: Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Java, Flores, Papua, where she went and took her several months, of course, it's a huge country, to really sample infected banana plants across these islands. That resulted in a collection of about 200 islets. And what we noticed there is that, and also looking at the other strains that we collected, she concluded based on her research that these species here that we previously collectively called Fusarium oxysporum, Formis specialis oxysporum, the race 1 strains of it, they are actually truly different Fusarium species that sit in different clades. So here you see Fusarium odoratissimum TR4, which is, as you can see, different from all the others genetically. What you also see here is that the majority of isolates from Indonesia is actually TR4. So we find TR4 here at the tip of Sumatra and at the very, very eastern part of Papua. So we really wonder, how is it possible that this has spread so much across the entire country? And this has to do with the transmigration policy, most likely, that was implemented 150 years ago and only stopped in 2015. So many people from, for instance, Java were translocated or encouraged to start living in other parts of the country. So I'm just speeding up a little bit now. So another student is Nadia Ordonia. So she looked at Fusarium diversity from a much more global perspective. So as you can see here, she really looked into isolates from around the world. So we have a deep sample from Indonesia, which is also the center of origin of banana and therefore also of many banana pathogens, including Fusarium species. Nadia looked at the global picture together with Fernando and Nadia and Nadia. And then David Torres, a PhD student in the group originated from Mexico, he did the bioinformatics of these isolates and of this collection of isolates. So the details are not very important. I will just very briefly summarize it. You see here the phylogenetic tree of all the banana-associated Fusarium species. And what you see here is here you see a lot of diversity. So these are the race 1 strains. So you really see different clades that are genetically really distinct and different. But if you look here, so these are all the tropical race 4 strains that we have identified. And essentially what you see, this is one clonal species. Okay, so remember, race 1 is a variety of species. Tropical race 4 is a single species. Here you see it again. This is the race 1 clade, or it is, yeah, the clade with 2 groups. Clade 2 has most of the race 1 species, and then here you see again the TR4 clade, which is essentially 1 species. So we only a few isolates that belong to Fusarium odoratissimum that are not as pathogenic as TR4. So TR4, in a nutshell, is truly clonal. Now, we use that also to do some forensic studies. For instance, there was a new incursion, so we went into Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar, together with our collaborator, Sijun Zheng from Biodiversity, who lives in Yunnan in southern China. So we sampled in these countries, and we identified that both in Vietnam, or in these countries, Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar, TR4 was present, and mostly in Chinese plantations that moved to these countries because of the TR4 pressure in Yunnan. But if you then sequence those isolates, you see the sequences. So here you have the new isolates from China, Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. The red ones, they're very similar to all the others that we've sequenced from Pakistan, the Philippines, Jordan, and Lebanon, and many others. But if you look at those sequences, although they are clonal, of course there are small genetic differences, and you can use those differences to build a forensic pipeline. So that's what we did. And if you use that pipeline on the data, you really can see that the isolates in Pakistan and the Philippines are very similar. The isolates from Lebanon and Jordan are very similar. And you see that the isolates from Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar are very similar to the ones from China. So this is also underscoring that most likely the isolates from Laos, Vietnam, and Myanmar have been disseminated from Chinese origin. And so with that, we now, once there is a new incursion and you do this analysis, you can kind of predict what is the origin of this incursion. Now, we also did that on the Colombian strains. So here we have a very preliminary phylogeny of all the sequenced TR4 strains that we have. So 23 were sequenced. We have 2 reference strains. This is a race TR4 strain. This is a race 1 strain. We have based a bioinformatics pipeline based on SNPs, and we see 4 major clusters: Indonesia and the Philippines, the Middle East and the Colombian strains also sit in that cluster, China and the Greater Mekong area, and Australia. As I said, don't forget it's preliminary. Yeah, so this is an hypothesis based on the data that we have, and we need to have more data, but it's kind of predicting what is an origin of contaminations. So what we see then in a nutshell, and I'm almost done, is that we see that the dissemination of Fusarium resembles the origin and the dissemination of banana as a crop. And so we want to have this global picture of diversity, also to understand dissemination, and of course eventually to understand and to better be able to breed varieties for these countries. But as I said, the underlying factor of the problems we are faced with is genetic uniformity. We have a monocrop of Cavendish around the world, super resistant to race 1, but significantly facilitating the dissemination of TR4. And we have to understand the genetics of this diversity that you see here in this slide. There is abundant diversity in banana, but we are only scratching the surface in using that diversity to improve the crop. And of course, that has to change. So that's, for instance, why we started a breeding company in the Netherlands, together with Chiquita and Kijin and Musa Radix, to breed new varieties for banana using the latest genetic tools to come up with traditionally bred new varieties. And one of the sources of that is, and again, that's Fajar's work, he traveled across Sumatra to map and identify wild diploids in the country. So you see all those orange dots. So he is genetically characterizing that germplasm. And of course, this type of germplasm is a phenomenal, rich resource for improving our future banana crops and to make it more sustainable and primarily more diverse. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I really would like to thank the team that is involved in this research program. I wholeheartedly would like to thank the Department of Phytopathology at Wageningen University, and of course our sponsors and collaborators. And with that, I would like to congratulate you once more with the 50th anniversary of SIP, and I wish you a very nice meeting. Thank you.